Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar discussion this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. There will be plenty more people coming in the next minute or so. We have 129 people with us now, but I think a few more will be coming in over the next 30 seconds or so. So we're just going to wait a minute or so before we get started. In terms of some introductory remarks, you can see from the screen, my name is Toby Webb. I'm the founder of Innovation Forum. I can't claim any credit for the success of this webinar. That all goes to my colleagues, Ellen and Savannah. Thank you so much for working with the CottonConnect team and you, our community, to put this on and to get everybody in the room. We're looking forward to a fascinating conversation. In the usual way, we will put this up on our YouTube channel and on our podcast platforms. So if something happens and you can't listen to the whole thing, or you want to listen to it later, or you want to excitedly send it to someone or everybody you know, you'll be able to do that using your podcast link. Any good podcast provider will be hosting the Innovation Forum podcast. So if you're not signed up for the Innovation Forum podcast, just go and search for that anywhere on any podcast provider of any note, and you'll find this webinar within a few days. Equally, if you'd like to see our beautiful visages on YouTube, you can do that by going to YouTube and searching for Innovation Forum. Do stop me when I get too technical, but I think that's a fairly simple way that you can either view this in video or listen in audio afterwards. So thank you all very much for joining us. We are going to talk about cotton. We're going to talk about regenerative cotton. How do we move it further forward? What is the future of cotton farming with regard to scaling regenerative cotton? That is what we're talking about today. So we're going to hear from Alison Ward, CEO of CottonConnect, Prakash Philip, who is the Senior Director for Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning, and Hardeep Desai, who's the Global Head of Farm Programs. Before we get into a quick Q&A with our three speakers, we're going to show you a very short film trailer for a documentary film we shot in January this year with CottonConnect in the fields and factories of Gujarat. And you can find that. There'll be various links to that posted throughout the webinar. You can find it on the Innovation Forum YouTube channel. It's about 10 minutes long, and it shows the journey that CottonConnect, their farmers and ginners and spinners have been going on. But we're just going to show you some highlighted versions of it in a minute. We're going to show you it as a trailer. So in a moment, a film will appear, but don't worry, it's not very long and it's quite good, we think. So hopefully you won't get bored and wander off. And then we can have a discussion with Alison, Prakash and Hardeep and then get your questions. And when it comes time for your questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom navigation bar. I urge you to post short, relevant questions. We always get somebody who likes to go on a long essay-based rant about the inequalities inherent in human civilization. If you want to do that, by all means, knock yourself out. But we won't be addressing long-winded arguments and points. We're looking for interesting bits. We're looking for your thoughts on things we might have missed. We're looking for critical commentary is very welcome. Just bear in mind, it's quite a small chat screen, so try and keep your remarks brief. So without further ado, let's have a quick look at the highlights of the film we shot in January, which helps tell the CottonConnect and Regen Cotton in Gujarat story. This is Alison Ward, the CEO of CottonConnect.
What we want to do is understand how we can take regenerative agricultural practices and apply it to smallholder farmers.
This year, I made a challenge to the people running CottonConnect. Show me what you do on the ground. Let me see if it works. Let's talk about what difference it will make. They said yes. This is the village of Katkoi in the state of Gujarat in India.
We help farmers learn really good agricultural techniques. So that might be using the right pesticides. It's also about using biopesticides.
અમારા ખેતરમાં અમે જે બાયોપેસ્ટિસાઇડ નાખીએ છીએ એનાથી કપાસ પણ લીલો રહે છે. અમારી જે જમીન છે એ પણ વર્મી કમ્પોસ્ટ ખાતરથી ફળદ્રુપ્ત છે અને હમણાં જ્યારે આપણે
which is all well and good, but the truth is this is a moving target.
The looming issue for us is climate change.
અમે જ્યારે ખેતરમાં જઈએ છીએ ત્યારે વધારે તાપ પડે છે. વધારે તાપ લીધે અમારા આરોગ્ય પર અસર થાય છે.
So we're seeing erratic monsoons, we're seeing excessive heat.
ગયા વર્ષે જે કમોસમી વરસાદ પડ્યો હતો તો એ વધારે પ્રમાણમાં પડ્યો હતો તો ઘણા ખેતરોમાં પાણી ભરાઈ ગયેલું તો એના લીધે કપાસ પણ મરી ગયેલો.
We can talk to farmers and educate them, understanding how to use composting better to retain moisture if it gets really hot, if there is excessive flooding, how to replant the cotton if that's appropriate.
How do we know you can trust that your garment is made from this cotton rather than someone else's?
It is kept in a designated area for our program.
So at the gym, it's a very simple mechanised process that separates on one side this fluffy cotton wool and on the other side you get the seed.
The bales are then stored in a designated area again for our program. They definitely have met the expected standard of the facility.
I asked the CottonConnect team if we could come together for one last discussion, specifically so I could ask,
what's next? Because the risk for CottonConnect, as I see it, is that fantastic islands of excellence,
Yeah.
and all around you, it's not quite so good.
Those are the norms as of today. These norms are changing, evolving. So that is why it makes it a journey.
Thank you. Well, I see 205 of you are still with us, so that's a good sign. So if that didn't put you to sleep, I imagine it's woken you up and you're ready to discuss with Alison, Prakash and Hardeep some of the ways in which this works and the ways it can be better. So at Innovation Forum, we're not all about PR and just showing off pilot projects. In fact, I'm going to be asking the CottonConnect team in a moment, how can we move beyond these the smaller scale efforts to go larger, and that's really what we all want to do. So we're going to be talking about that and a number of other issues. So you can put your questions into the Q&A anytime you like. I do suggest you wait a little bit until you've heard from the team, because the questions may be answered by them. But also, if you can make sure that your questions are not all in the last 5 minutes of the webinar, because what always happens is the last 4 minutes, we all have to start talking very quickly because about 10 brilliant questions come in. So let's strike a balance between instant reactions and not doing it all in the last minute. So Alison, let me come to you first. There are lots of challenges in the cotton industry. The film brought to light some around climate change. What are some of the other challenges that you're tackling in the work that you do in India and elsewhere? Alison.
Yes, yeah. So thanks, and Toby, thanks first of all for your visit to India in January this year. And at CottonConnect, we really wanted Toby to come and look at our programs and really give that critical view. And I think in particular at Innovation Forum, your work across commodities is really interesting for us, because I think there's more we can learn across commodities. There's more that we can learn from different sectors. So I think it's really important as we go on this journey of regenerative, we look at that. I think as we look at the cotton sector, only around 30% of cotton is classified as sustainable at the moment. So there's a sort of a way to go, even at an entry level in terms of cotton sustainability. So it's a huge opportunity. I think there are sort of two big issues. One is around climate change, which you've mentioned already, Toby. So last week in India, parts of India reached the highest ever temperature recorded at 52.3 Fahrenheit degrees C. So really high temperatures already, unseasonably high. We've seen a couple of years ago in Pakistan really extreme flooding where people lost their lives and livelihoods, and we saw that in the Cotton Belt. And we've seen pest attacks as well, so increased pest attacks as a result of these shifting climatic situations. So, and it is the most vulnerable in our supply chains that are affected by it. And in particular, we've been looking at the impact on women and their increased burden of work. I think the second thing we're seeing, and I don't think we're touching on it today, but I know that Toby, you've been covering it in your forums, is we're seeing this increased legislation coming through and regulation. And I think we've got this sort of double squeeze almost coming through on the communities we work with. We've got on the one hand an environmental and social pressure, but equally the governance of ESG is really coming up the agenda and will mean more rigor in data collection, more rigor in what we're doing, more rigor around claims. So I think there's a real tightrope to walk here between having effective impact, but then how can we really communicate about that and really inspire the missing 70% in that sustainable cotton production to take action.
Thanks. And just so we're clear about what we mean by regenerative, perhaps you can tell us, where was that for you 10 years ago and where is it now? Perhaps characterize the difference in the journey, and let's put perhaps some of the scenes we've just seen into context. How widespread are what you would call regen practices now? So perhaps give us a little overview of the journey you've been on, Alison.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the past 10 years that I've been enrolled at CottonConnect, we've been doing less bad. So we've been really focusing on reducing the negative impacts of cotton farming production. So less water use, less pesticide use, and that leading to sort of better farm practices. So really focusing on good agricultural practice as a technique. As we look to the future, what we really want to focus on is that positive impact at a farm level and really using regenerative. And we've really seen in North America, regenerative really becoming quite a mainstream agricultural proposition. We've been looking at how that relates in a smallholder context. So, let's make sure we're not doing more harm by bringing that in. Let's make sure our methodologies are appropriate to the smallholder context. And let's really look at the farm more holistically. So let's look not just at the cotton crop itself, but we've been looking at animal welfare. We've been looking more strongly at those border crops and intercrops, and then looking at those techniques which can help to mitigate climate change. And we've seen a little bit at that in the film, but also really have a much more positive effect on environmental and social issues.
So would you characterize where you are now with the regen villages, communities? Would you say it's an evolution or it's a step change from, say, sustainable?
I mean, I think it's a gradient. So it's that evolution. So and as always in any human change, there are leaders and people that do sort of take on board all training and they really implement it. And then you have farmers that are a bit more skeptical, very human nature, more skeptical, do some of the things that might be in the training some of the time. So this is really a journey, I think, both for us and those farm communities we work in. So how do we begin to introduce more of these regenerative techniques? And if we take no-till, for example, I think it was last year I was out in Maharashtra, which is the central cotton belt in India, and I met some of our trainers. So these aren't farmers, these are trainers. And I asked, and Hardeep was kindly translating for me. I said, so what do you think about no-till? And actually, they couldn't even answer the question because the concept of not tilling was just not something that was in even an idea at that point. And they were saying, it can be, they were telling me how deep till should be. And obviously, you're looking for a lighter and lighter till. But as you go in and really change some very traditional methods of farming, you do get responses to ideas that are completely out of context. So we really have to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate, it's appropriate to the context, it's appropriate to those people. And we really thought about that journey, that you can't go from 0 to 100, you know, really rapidly. We have to do it in stages and have to take people with us, but also listen to those communities. And I think, Toby, that's what you did in January. You really spent time with our farm communities, listening to what they were saying, hearing about their challenges, so that we can make sure that our actions are appropriate.
Yeah. So how widespread are those sort of practices that we saw? Because there's always the challenge. You know, if I didn't know you guys well when I went out there, I'd have been thinking, are they just showing me the 5 best farmers they can find? You know, and there's the old adage that, you know, pilots never fail and they never scale. So just, you know, the film talks about the kind of, I guess what we might call the kind of best practice that we know of now, right? Which we're calling regen. But how widespread is that in the work that you do, and how do you hope to move that forward, you know, for more farmers to take part in that?
Yeah, so we are at the beginning of a regenerative journey, and I think it's exactly forums like this where we can talk more about it. We do have leading brands and retailers who are actively on the regenerative journey with us. There's clearly more to do, and I think, Toby, you and I have talked, and it's at the end of the film, about this jurisdictional landscape and how do we begin to move the dial. Is it government intervention? Is it actors coming together to create this landscape approach? So I think there is a need to sort of work differently as we look at the future. But I think at the beginning of this journey, we need to show that it's a proven technique, that it has the impact that we need, and that it really is appropriate. So we work in Bangladesh, we work in Pakistan, we work in India. Each of those agronomic situations is different. So how do we make sure that our work is appropriate in those situations?
Yeah, big challenges there. What about some of the partnerships and collaborations then that you've built along the way? What does that kind of value chain look like now?
So I think our success comes from our brand partnerships, and we're fortunate enough to have brands that were part of our setup 15 years ago. We've got programs that have been in operation for 10 years. So we've got that commercial angle. I think the next most important partner is the farmers. And I think that one of the things we've really looked to do through our model of local implementing partners who speak local languages, who are in and out of villages all the time, is that we are trusted in those communities. So we're trusted in the information we share. We've never sold ever into communities. So we're always neutral in terms of recommending agricultural input. So we are trusted in the information that we share. And then I think we've got this missing middle, which I think is really coming up really strongly. So ginners, spinners, and then manufacturing. And I think that we've got active programs, and we all saw the ginners as part of the film. Really a very active community now, bringing in solar panels into their operations, really thinking about the rights of their workers, their seasonal workers in that supply chain, and really looking at really investing beyond, into the communities and beyond. So I think it's, for us at the moment, they're our sort of stakeholders. We've got our farmers, we've got our implementing partners, the brands, and then the manufacturing community. Moving forward, I think we'll see more government interest, and certainly we saw just after you've been in India, the Indian government hosted a big textile conference, and there the Prime Minister was really putting support behind, government support for this key crop, which we haven't really seen before, but I'm sure will really, really move the dial. Yeah,
no doubt. So Prakash, let me put you on the spot here for a moment as the head of monitoring, evaluation and learning. What differences as the programs that we show in the video, what have they made so far? What's happened in those places that wasn't happening before? Just give us the headlines.
Thanks, Toby. From looking at an impact assessment point of view, these farmers were conventional farmers who started their journey into regenerative. They were following conventional practices, but the program has led them to embrace various practices to enhance biodiversity. They started picking up the habit of, making homemade pesticides and applying them in their farms. And they also, started giving focus to the farm animals. The farm animals started receiving vaccinations, and there is a new angle of animal health was promoted. And there was significant reduction in terms of, chemical fertilizers and, by the project farmers in comparison to the control farmers. And, also we used the Cool Farm tool to assess the carbon emissions, which proved that about 23% lower carbon emissions in the project area.
From what I understand, though, that the yield lag problem has not been as bad with these regen programs. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that's such a core part of the business case for farmers.
Yeah, see, if you start slowly with any program, like, if you convert any farmer into, in a regenerative farmers on a very fast-paced manner, of course, they can go on a, reduced yield mode for some time. But when we look at our farmers, we always look for the low-hanging fruits at first, increasing the adoption levels and, slowly reducing the chemical fertilizers. So, of course, there are some farmers who suffered, slight reduction in their yields, but that's not the uniform pattern. There are farmers who also increase their yields in the first year itself through, efficient resources management and efficient use of water. Because if you look at, the conventional farmers, there's a practice of, using excessive water, excessive, chemicals. So efficient use of resources is actually helping them to optimize their yields, and at the same time reducing the input cost that is actually leading to better profits.
Yeah, I mean, I had some really interesting numbers, which in fact I think we put in the film about how farmers have got lower input costs and are doing very well in terms of yield and harvest. Hardy, how long did that take to happen? And how do you talk to farmers about this to make this business case? Because as we all know, changing any kind of practice, whether it's in an office full of people or on a farm in Gujarat, is not easy. So tell us a bit about that, Hardy, please.
So it's not easy to convince the farmers. So for that we have created field demonstrations, so that, as you know, farmers follow the practice of seeing is believing. So once they see the tangible benefit of any sustainable practices, any regenerative practices, then they will definitely adopt. So, like, there are tangible benefits in terms of income from intercrop, or maybe the other practices related to the, as Prakash has already mentioned, the natural inputs and production center. So if they produce the quality natural input in the village, and they can get the quality inputs, natural inputs in the village, and also they can sell the inputs to the other farmers. So thereby also they can have the additional livelihoods. So it's a holistic approach. It's a combination of multiple regenerative practices that helps farmers to fetch better livelihood and better tangible profit. So that's how we started. But yeah, it takes time to mobilize a farmer in particular direction and motivate them to adopt the regenerative practices.
What were the most common objections that have come up from farmers? Is it around time, resources, or is it that kind of cultural change of, well, I do it this way because that's the way I do it?
Yeah, so normally farmers, they have been practicing the cotton cultivation practices since along. And if we approach them and suggest them to adopt certain practices, and then there will be obviously they say that why should we adopt these practices? So for that, normally there are also certain root cause. Like in some of the cases, farmers are not adopting the intercropping because they are facing the problem of attack of wild animals. So in absence of farm fencing, they are not growing intercrop. So there are certain reasons so that the farmers are not adopting certain practices, but we'll have to gradually convince them, we'll have to support them as much as we can, and then motivate them to adopt practices like zero tillage or minimum tillage is very difficult. So we'll have to tell them, the tangible benefit, and some in terms of reduction in weeding costs. In terms of also we can tell them that there is a lots of soil microbes in the soil, and if we destroy, and that says that it's microbes house. So if anyone destroys our house, then we feel a little very bad and disturbed. Our life is disturbed. So similarly, if we go for more tillage, you are disturbing the house of microbes, soil microbes. So that type of small examples also we give and motivate them to adopt the regenerative practices. Yeah.
Thank you. Prakash, let me ask you a bit more about impact. How do you know this stuff is working? I mean, it was interesting to stand in the village, and I've been to a lot of agricultural communities in different parts of the world, and I could really sense in the communities I visited this kind of community buy-in. And standing on one side of the road, the buffalo urine was being collected and used for biopesticides, and they hadn't quite got to doing it on the other side. And given the volume of it flowing down from these buffalo, you could really see that that's an important resource. And on one side of the road, it's being wasted. On the other side, it's being captured and being used in biopesticides. I never thought cow urine could bring a point home to me quite strongly, but it wasn't just the smell, it was the sight of it. So when things like that start working, how are you collecting data for evaluation? How are you knowing that this sort of thing is making an impact? Because in all the things we do, data and collection of data is probably the number one thing of topic of conversation. Prakash.
Bobby, let me take some time to elaborate a little bit on that. Because our regenerative program is based on the real regenerative code, and the compliance against the code of conduct is assessed through a robust verification process, which also includes a third-party verification. Having said that, the integrity of data is very crucial. So what we do, we work very closely with the farmers, ensuring that we capture all essential data points in the farmer field books. And in order to ensure that there is a data integrity and credibility, we conduct several layers of internal validations and verifications to validate our impact data, and we conduct third-party validations also. While the data collected through these processes is mostly quantitative, we equally recognize the importance of capturing qualitative insights. For that, we organize focus group discussions with the farmers, conduct interviews, and also consult industry experts with the data that has been analyzed using the farmer field book. And what we do, we take this data, we go back to the farmers, we provide feedback to the farmers, and also gather lessons learned from the farmers, on the data collected. This allows us to gather additional insights directly from the farmers rather than interpreting the data on our own terms. So this helps us to connect the dots. And we, not only just, collect some standard, data points, but based on the interventions, if there is something that is new happening in the farm, we create templates for that and capture that in terms of farmer stories, case studies, and what kind of impact they're benefiting, and trying to link some of these outcomes to certain practices. Okay, when the social impact is analyzed excessively through this process, the environment impact is also equally important. As I mentioned, we use carbon assessment tools and also periodically conduct life cycle assessments to map the various activities that is contributing towards significant carbon emissions in the supply chain. So it helps us to identify potential areas and work on corrective action plans, and and improve the process. But having said all these things, we are very focused on certain initiatives, like if a compost pit is being developed by a farmer, what actually it is contributing to them, whether it is only being used in their farms, whether they're able to sell and generate some impact out of that. And so these might be standalone activities that are happening. So what we do, we bring out farmer stories and case studies to bring out the specific impacts because of those interventions.
Thank you. Well, at the end of this, I'm going to ask you all to offer some key takeaways that you would like our audience to remember. And Alison, I will ask you to perhaps close with, where does this go? And you've already mentioned the landscape jurisdictional approach, which we're working with you on and trying to figure out some ideas on how that can happen. But I'll ask you to close with that. I think it's important that we talk about that big picture at the end. But we've got so many great questions here. I'm going to go straight into them. Now, audience, you can actually vote for the ones you like the most. So I'm going to pick the most popular question, which has 2 votes. So please do go through these Q&A, these questions, audience, and vote for the ones you like, and that helps me come to them. So just to be clear about this, one of the attendees is asking about, do you introduce a tracer to the fiber to prove origin? Now, we saw that bales were being individually tagged so that they could be segregated in the supply chain. But is there more you want to say about that? Prakash, is that your area?
So, Toby, as you correctly mentioned, we use our TraceBale software to, do the digital traceability of the cotton that is coming into our supply chain and flowing out to various retailers. At the same time, we partnered with Helixa, where we apply the Helixa DNA marker depends on the demand of the customers. And that with the application of Helixa DNA marker, the cotton can be traced, at any levels where you can do a testing and identify that whether the cotton that is in the garment is actually came from the same supply chain. So we have a partnership with Helixa, and we are exploring, and we are working with some of the brands to take that forward. Yeah.
Okay, here's a question maybe relevant for you, Hardeep. Renata is asking, do you consider including zero deforestation, conversion of natural vegetation as sustainability criteria required for what is considered regenerative? And that's very interesting, isn't it? If we look at the sort of tiered approaches to regen, you end up at the top with things like agroforestry and zero deforestation. But where are you on that subject at the moment, Hardeep? Is that something you can address?
So as part of the regenerative program, we are promoting agroforestry. We are, motivating the farmers to go for, a combination of tree plantation, like, trees that can provide them nutritious fruit as well as, income. And regarding the deforestations, we take care and we ensure that the legal norms are followed while we do any program. And regarding the revision in code, we normally consult the various stakeholders of the program and then take necessary decision at an appropriate time. So that process is always on, and we will take necessary changes if it requires.
Yeah, I mean, it struck me looking at the communities and the landscape that any forest that was around those communities was probably removed quite a long time ago. So it's interesting, Hardy, that you talk about planting trees rather than cutting them down, because whilst there are some trees there definitely isn't a lot of forest cover. So I guess your focus is around helping the villagers understand the benefits of agroforestry. How far have you come with that?
So like we are helping them in providing the various type of saplings, combination of, as I said, fruit tree and other trees, and also converging with the government department so that they can also support and provide the saplings them on time. And also we are creating awareness about the conservation of trees. So merely planting the tree will not serve the purpose. How best we can take care of the trees and then ensure survival of the trees. So that's how we are motivating them, and we are also doing convergence with the local forest department for the same. Yeah.
And of course, you can make the business case to farmers that trees reduce temperatures. And we heard repeatedly in the filming that we did how hotter temperatures are affecting particularly female farmers. So that's another business case, I guess.
Yeah, and we have also started One Farmer One Tree campaign. So that is for across all the programs and all the countries. So we motivate the farmers to grow at least one tree and take care of that tree. So as we are working on scale, the results are quite encouraging.
One tree per what?
One farmer, one tree campaign. Yeah.
We
have initiated this campaign. Yeah.
Every year a new tree, or
every year.
Okay, well, it's a good start, isn't it? Mark Sussman's got a great question which I'm going to put to Alison. This is very good, Mark. Thank you. I love it when we get a good Q&A session. We've got some phenomenal questions here. What is the exact definition of regenerative? How is it quantified, and how many CottonConnect farmers are there in India? So there's some big picture tough questions for you, Alison. Go.
Yeah. So Mark, really good question, and it's definitely something as a sector we're grappling with. So there isn't a definition within the sector. So in 2021, we established our first real code for regenerative, we established that with a group of experts and with a brand partner. And we deliberately did that to try and put a frame around what regenerative meant. Since then, we have revised it to look at that code through a human rights due diligence lens. And we're looking at it again to see, having done work in this area, really what next should be in that code. I think it's 500,000 farmers in India. Is that correct? I think I'm going to get a nod from Prakash. Got that correct.
Yeah.
So obviously we have a great opportunity to scale. I see there's from Anonymous a question about farmers already practicing regenerative in India, and perhaps one thing I omitted to talk about in the introduction was that when we've looked at regenerative, we have to remember that the origins of regenerative actually came from Indore in Madhya Pradesh in India. So for those who are technical on the call, the Indore composting technique really forms the basis of a lot of agriculture techniques in the UK and the US. So, and there's also within India a concept of zero input agriculture. So there's a lot within India already, and I think one thing we want to do at CottonConnect, and we're very much we're not, although we're a UK owned business, we're about markets, is that we really, and a part of our philosophy is that we really look and celebrate and talk about those voices from the markets we work with. And this is a program driven by teams in India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. This is not driven from the UK. And I think that's really important as we think about appropriateness of our interventions. So Mark, some more to do on, I think, as a sector defining regenerative, and obviously working with others like Textile Exchange, with Better Cotton, with the Cotton Trust Protocol as well, to really look at that commonality between our efforts.
I think it's a brave move, but somebody has to go first. But I know some sectors, like the wine sector, where I do some work, where the big producers, the kind of companies you would work with if you were in grape growing, are far too nervous to talk about regen because it's been captured by the organic movement, who are very small in terms of volume, but very loud. So there's a question here from Enzo related to that. How would you characterize the difference then between regenerative and organic? Let's make that absolutely clear.
Yes. So we also have organic programs in India and in Pakistan. And it was really the beginning of our journey at CottonConnect to work with organic farmers. I think we've been fortunate enough to learn from organic, to take what's great about organic. So if you look at the in-farm preparations that you saw the women preparing, they're very much, it was, I think, my first trip to India. I found a really inspirational doctor and his wife who were teaching tribal farmers about the sort of preparations from cow urine, from cow dung to apply to their crops. And we've really taken that into mainstream cotton farming. And I think as we look at regenerative and organic, honestly, the main difference is probably about the GM seed. And we've been pragmatic in our work in India. GM is really prevalent. So rather than exclude those farmers, we've really looked to ensure that we're improving that GM based cotton, and we see that as an offer within regenerative. We also have an organic regenerative pilot in India. It has been more difficult, if I'm honest. I think the double certification that's required for organic regenerative is tough on our local partners, and that goes back to my point at the top of this discussion, that as we're looking at what's required from legislation, regulation in order to make claims, what we want and what's feasible at a farm level is sometimes it can be too much. So there's sort of that trade-off, I think, for us. But we hope that, and we're very much open to discussion on our regenerative work, on our code. So we, part of this is, if you want to come and give some feedback on what we're doing, we generally are open to that. So please, I think we can provide our emails. So please come and talk to us.
Is it the case, Alison, that one of the ways that farmers buy into this is because they see immediate benefits. And that's why regen kind of one of the reasons regen is an easier sell than organic, with perhaps better long-term results. Is that a fair way of putting it?
So I think, as Hardeep talked about, the low-hanging fruit with farmers, and I think with regenerative, shift into local. So then if you take neem as a tree, which is really prevalent in Asia, the neem oil is an amazing property, and apparently King Charles uses it to on his sheep. So there you go. You know, it really has properties in terms of antibacterial properties. So it works on pests. It's also a growth enhancer. So really using those local techniques really save money and are quite instant. And I think that's quite, and it's again back to this human change journey, isn't it, that we talked about, that if you get something that's working quite easily, and also the fact that you've done it yourself. And I think we, you know, Toby, you met our women climate change ambassadors. They were so proud that they had information and were standing tall because they could talk to others in their community. And I think that human factor is so important, and that sort of motivation as we go on this journey. So I've talked about now.
In all the other work we do in this space, when we talk about smallholder to smallholder communication, the two things that always come up as the most significant are exactly that. Those groups of motivated ambassadors, the sort of evangelicals, and then the other thing is farmer WhatsApp groups. And those two things are always coming up as the most significant ways to engender change. Interesting question here from James Griffiths about the EU Green Claims Directive. Any thoughts on that, Prakash or Alison? Maybe this is in both of your areas. I mean, are you concerned? We've seen companies in the past write, "This is sustainable cotton" on their labels, and then you go, "Oh, great, well, how?" And then there's no information. So clearly that is a risk for them. You've got lots of data to back up your position. Is there any concern amongst any of you about the Green Claims Directive? Prakash, any thoughts?
Yeah. So what we are doing in order to, whichever legislations are coming up, we are revising our code of conduct to align with the requirements of the legislations. And we collect the required environment data related to that to validate our claims to make we are making credible claims. And we carry out the LCAs and the GHG emission assessments and validate our data. And we are updating our claims process to ensure that sustainability claims allowed from the real program are substantiated by verifiable data. The process will only allow verified claims to be made to customers. So we are safeguarding ourselves and also taking care of other aspects such as human rights due diligence and all the social aspects that are required. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we have a trace bail to ensure traceability. We give a broader and a clear, transparent view of the cotton traveling from the farm groups to the last garment. So we capture all that, using different collaborations and partnerships also to, as I mentioned, ensuring that the traceability through the tracer system. And we have a robust MEL system with a robust 3-layer verification and external verification and validation systems. And we partner with all the alliances and recognitions that we currently have to ensure that we are on top of all these things and ensuring that we are aligning with all the requirements.
Thank you. We had a question here about child labour. Let's just clarify that. Hardeep, any child labour issues? I mean, the villages I saw lots of children coming to and from school. I didn't see any working in the fields. Have you found any, and what are you doing about it?
So the issue related to child labor, we have adopted a preventive approach. We build awareness in terms of rights of children, in terms of importance of education for the children, and also we work very closely with the school management committee in all our program villages. So this is an integral part of CottonConnect's every program. And we work very closely with the school to find out the out of school children, whether they are because they are the potential child labor. So we work closely with them, and we are also getting good support from the schools because under right to education, it is free and compulsory primary education for the children in India. So that's we work very closely. It's a there is also a thin line between the in smallholder farming, the children, they are helping their family on their farms. So what is the work, you know, we can allow to do children to do on their farm, and then the prohibited work under the ILO conventions. So we create awareness regarding this with the farmers, the parents, and also the children and the schools. And we have observed that you know, children are in school, and they are not doing any child labor as of now. We haven't observed any those cases. But yeah, as part of preventive measures, we have adopted the, you know, checks and balances. So unless and until we check and then claim that yes, there is no child labor, so that method we have adopted, in which we check with the parents, we check with the farm laborers, their children, and also with the school. So to make you know, sure that all the children are in school and they are studying. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just a note for some of you on the Q&A, we've got some great questions coming in. Also, Deepshika, one of the colleagues at CottonConnect, is posting some useful materials and links that answer some of these questions in both the Q&A and the chat. So you can see quite a lot there in the chat function that answers some of these questions. But there's an interesting question here from Bertram. Perhaps this is one for you, Hardeep, too, around what are the average yields of regenerative cotton per hectare? And what are the other crops that you intercrop the cotton with? So anything you can share there, Hardeep.
So the average yield we have observed in this is around 800 to 850 kilograms per acre. And earlier the farmers are, you know, in some cases farmers are getting the yield around 700 kilograms, and the average land holding size is around 2.5 acres per farmer in the particular area. Yeah. And there are multi crops, like they are also growing intercrops like green gram, then also black gram as intercrops. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting question here about potential for carbon credits. What are your views on that, Alison? It's a controversial area at the moment and has been for a long time. Any thoughts on looking at Vera or any of the other standards for carbon credits, or is that too far down the road at this stage, Alison?
Yeah, so I think we've already started, and Prakash has already talked about our carbon measurement, and we've been working with the Cool Farm tool to do some carbon measurements. So I think the first thing is that understanding of really good measurement on carbon and what impact we have. Then going on to, you know, sort of the carbon markets. I mean, I haven't ever seen a successful program there to date, and I don't know, Toby, if you have. And I think it's something that, I mean, I think when I was at Cadbury 10 years ago, we were talking about it, but I still haven't seen something that's effective in that area for smallholders. You correct me, Toby, you may know more than me, but I think let's get the base right. Let's understand carbon and our carbon interventions. Let's get the right measurement tools in, and then we can look about if we can monetize it at all. But I mean, I don't know what you're seeing, Toby, in terms of that market, whether you're seeing it really growing, whether people are moving away from it. I think the idea, you know, that you can offset your carbon, I'm not sure that is, you know, lots of people do that. Is that right now? Is that the right thing we should be doing? I think there's quite a lot of questions here to be answered.
Yeah, I think there's, I mean, from our experience, and I'm not an official speaker on this webinar, so I'll be very brief, but there are two areas that are happening at the same time. One is the overall legitimacy of the idea of carbon credits, you know, which have taken a beating. Some people say there's misreporting, there's cherry picking. Other people point out there are projects where security runs amok, and the funding does not get down to the communities. All of those things can be true at the same time. And equally, you get some great projects too. On the smallholder side, you know, we've seen Microsoft and others try and put technology out there to measure smallholder carbon, but it is expensive to keep doing soil sampling. Soil sampling often gives you a different result. And so what we see now from the large companies that we engage with through our conferences and webinars is what they'd like to have is more of this landscape or jurisdictional approach, where they say, why should Nestle and Unilever or Primark and Mango argue over which farmer's cotton carbon is theirs? and then the government says, well, some of that carbon's ours, and the farmer says, hang on a minute, it's my land. Rather than getting into that mess, which is what accounting can lead to, what we're starting to see are kind of landscapes, jurisdictions, supply shed approach, where companies contribute to making a landscape or jurisdiction better, measure the outcomes, which technology is enabling us to do now much more cheaply, and say, okay, this area of significant size has got better, and we can count that against our targets. How they might monetize that from a conference we ran last week would be things like companies setting an individual carbon budget. Let's say large apparel brand X that has a lot of cotton that they source, they may have an internal carbon budget. They calculate scope 3 as much as they can, and they say, okay, we will allocate money from our internal carbon price to inset carbon in this area of the supply chain. So there's definitely potential for this, but it's going to take some time. We're not there at the moment. That's certainly the views that I'm seeing. Early days, and we're seeing some companies be really bold and start to say, okay, well, we've set a carbon price of $35 a ton. Let's find some verification we can afford to do in the supply chain and pay some farmers to sequester some more carbon. But these are pilot projects at the moment because there are lots of challenges. We can do a whole separate webinar on that, and in fact we have done many and we'll do many more. So we'll perhaps move on from the carbon question for now. Still lots of great questions coming in, and we've got about 9 minutes left, so thank you all for them. There's some questions about scale, which I'd like to come to in a minute. But before we do that, I think we've covered the monitoring angles quite significantly, so I'll disregard more on that. But what about the brands? Before we talk about scale, let's talk about brands. This stuff is not easy to explain, Alison. So when you sit down with Primark and C&A and insert name of large apparel company here, what does that conversation look like? And what does it take for them to value this? How do they understand the value of it from their point of view as designers and retailers?
Yeah, and I think it's a real challenge for us. And I think that if you're in apparel, it's sort of obvious that you need to invest in cotton, isn't it? If you've got a cotton portfolio. The idea, and there's a couple of landscape questions have come up as well. The convincing a board that actually you need to go beyond the borders of the cotton farm and look at that wider farm community and the wider landscape, I think is a step. And I think that's where we really need brands and retailers that really have visions beyond 1 or 2 years, that really are looking at a 10-year vision. We're really fortunate that we do work with some of those brands, which is why part of the reason we're on this journey. So for us, I think it's about how that C-suite is operating, how they're looking at their accountability. So, you know, we've talked before about shared value and shared value in supply chains, but also looking at resilience in supply chains for the future. So what does a resilient supply chain look like, and what are the hallmarks of that resilience? And I think that's where we're really looking to shift the dial with brands and retailers. And it is hard. I mean, fashion by its definition, you know, changes season on season. But how do you find those partners that really look at a 10-year program and invest in the long term? We've seen it in cocoa. We are seeing it in cotton as well. So I think for us that they're the kind of partnerships we're seeking.
Okay, let's talk about scale then. Interesting opportunity for you to mention the turkey work here,
Yes.
Alice, because Hanno Schultz is asking, well, why don't we shift from small scale to commercial farming? And I was really intrigued to hear your colleague Dawa talking about how his work in Turkey with farmers on much larger farms doing regen cotton was having a very similar result to what we're seeing on 2-hectare farms in Gujarat. Can you tell us a bit more about that, Alison?
Yeah, so I think as we look at these larger farming systems, and certainly, and we've got, I don't want to sound like an advert for you, Tony, but we've got your innovation forum in the US coming up. And I think and we'll be talking to some of these sort of US farms as well, that where we're seeing what can we learn from large, medium and smallholder farmers on regenerative. And I think that probably our insights in Turkey, I think one of them which we shared with you was originally the reliance on technology and the reliance on inputs. And we were seeing in Turkey that farmers were completely overspraying on pesticides. So they were spraying 6 times a year. They were using drone technology, but the way the drone sprays, it doesn't get to the underside of the cotton leaves. It wasn't getting to the sucking pests on the underside of the leaf. So all of that great technology has to come with knowledge. And I think wherever we are in the world, that translation of the scientific insights and the scientific tools that we have, whether it be, someone's asked a question about a satellite technology, how we have these amazing opportunities now. We've just done a piece of work with the European Space Agency to track weather data. How we translate that at a farm level and how we make that relevant to farmers, whether it be a farm in Turkey or a farm in the US or a farm in India, is for me the most critical point. That it's got to be relevant to the farmer themselves. It's got to be the right stage they are, and then it's also got to be relevant to their climatic and soil conditions. So I think we really saw in Turkey, and I think the breakthrough moment was Arif from our team in Pakistan, who's a lead agronomist. He's an entomologist in training. He picked up some soil and he just showed and said, there's nothing in this soil. There's no life. And I think at that point, that was the tipping point in Turkey to sort of really get the dialogue moving with those farmers.
Before we close out with the conversation about scale and concluding remarks, another one here actually on that same theme. Are you working only with individual farmers or with organised farming schemes? And is it rain-fed or irrigated cotton? Thanks to Jackie Strong from Ilovo Sugar in Malawi for asking that. Always very interesting to hear from others growing different crops. So I'd love to hear a bit more on that. Who wants to take that question?
Adi,
Adi?
if that's okay.
Yeah, so mainly the farmers are individual farmers in India, and we work through a network of local partners. Mainly they are the NGOs. So with the help of them, we enroll the farmers in our program, and then we implement the various activities throughout the season. And these are the basically smallholder farmers, and they take part in the training meetings and also field demonstration and exposure visits. So basically year round they take part in the program and adopt various regenerative or sustainable practices after attending the training. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have about 3 minutes left. So let's do a quick round the room on what would you like attendees of this webinar to remember. And then Alison, I'll close with you on how do we go to scale? What are your thoughts on taking that further? Hardeep, let me start with you and then Prakash. Hardeep, concluding remarks, what would you like people to remember?
So Toby, at CottonConnect, we are seeing real results from our regenerative program. We see improved soil health, more biodiversity initiatives by the farmers, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So we see the potential to scale up and replicate these practices, by adopting a jurisdictional or a landscape approach. So as we look into the future, our focus remains on driving impact and, amplifying the voices of the farmers. From an impact assessment perspective, science-based biodiversity and impact assessments are being rolled out, where we not only focus on adoption, but also on science-based measurable outcomes. I would like to leave you with that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Hardeep.
I think regenerative agriculture holds immense potential, and we can scale this up. And for that, everyone will have to play their role, starting from farmers to supply chain partners to brands and retailers and to consumers, government, as well as the CSR partners. So I think we'll have to develop a holistic plan for the farmers so that farmers can also get the maximum benefit of this program. And simultaneously, we will have to increase the demand for regenerative products. So that's how I think we can take this on scale. So, and the last word is, the action is, take small step, act now. So that I think we can do, because regenerative farming can very well help in addressing the issues related to climate change. Yeah.
Thank you, Hardeep. So, Alison, the final word to you. Final thoughts, and how are we going to scale here? Because, as we said in the film, it's all very well having these islands of excellence where you change some people's lives, but of course, all of us want to change everybody's lives for the better. So, any thoughts on that as we close out, Alison?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for all your great questions. I have been reading them, and sorry we haven't answered all of them, but we will try and come back to some of you. I think we have to start with the voice of communities and really inspire those communities, because unless we get that right, I think it all falls over. We also need to continue to look at the tip of the spear and really look at, some farmers will reach that gold standard, not all of them, but how do we keep moving on that journey? So how are we having continuous improvement? And then I think really adding into our model, which is about communities, NGOs, brands. So that commercial piece is really central to this success, as Hardeep has referenced. How do we add in government, and how do we create farm organizations so that we're getting a multiplier effect? And I think that's the bit we need to do next. And I think we need to jump this exponential jump from the model we have at the moment into this broader commercial and broader stakeholder model. And I hope, Toby, we will be talking soon about the research you've been doing on a jurisdictional approach that we'll be sharing more broadly with this community to sort of inspire our conversations further. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we'd love to do that. And, that chimes very much with the mood at the 2 Future of Food conferences and the Apparel and Textiles conference we've run in the last couple of months, that for want of a better solution, the collaborative one where landscapes, jurisdictions, supply sheds, whatever you call them, come into play. Once we get past some of the tricky attribute accounting elements, it really does seem like the only way forward. Because it's the only game in town, actually, as far as we can tell, when you're looking at mixed land use and farming communities. There's only so many ways you can do this, and this seems to be the one. There are lots of variants on the theme, of course, and we'll be publishing more about that and hosting an entire conference about it at the end of October in Amsterdam. So either way, you'll be hearing from us on that subject. In the meantime, thank you for your brilliant questions. The ones we didn't get to, we'll try to get back to you about via the CottonConnect team. Thank you, Deepshika, for doing your best to answer as many of them as you could. Thanks so much to Alison, Hardeep and Prakash, and to you, the audience, for a fascinating last hour. Every time I talk to you, I learn more. So thank you all, and we'll see you all.
Thank you, Toby.
Thanks, Toby.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Toby.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.